Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that focus on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. Our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, communities, and relationships. Our YouTube platform provides us with a space where we can have discussions on all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education have played a role and play a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures in order for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We also write thought pieces on our website on topics that relate to family, communities, and relationships. And if you like our discussions here, please do make sure that you check those out after this video. I've left the description down below. Now, as is the YouTube convention, please do subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you're aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like our content and you want to keep those conversations going, like, comment, and share this video. Let's get into it. Hello again, everyone. Very happy to be here with you on video 2 on our week on mental health. On this channel, we discuss topics that relate to mental health, education, and mental wellness. And this week, our focus is on mental health. Now, because I was definitely, intense last week in our discussions on education, I wanted to keep it light and airy while still informative and helpful this week on mental health. So I wanted to talk about self-concept. And self-concept is actually one of the workshops that we built within Project Purpose for our parent-child workshops. But I wanted to kind of discuss it for those of you who have a vague understanding of what it is, or who are just curious about the way that I've defined it. So I love talking about, self in a theoretical point of view. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you some of the abstract ideas around, the self-concept, some of how we've defined it, because it's difficult to define. But I do believe that there is huge value in knowing thyself. And if we don't take the time to kind of think of how we see ourselves in relation to others, how we see ourselves, to ourselves, it can get kind of confusing. And, we do experience different identities throughout our lives. We evolve. So there's as much as, some of us don't like to rock the boat and we like to kind of be the steady Eddie. And we like things to kind of stay the same. Who we are grows and changes with, experiences and with exposure to different things in the world around us. And there's this beautiful quote from Cervantes: "To know thyself will preserve thee from vanity." So when you know yourself, flaws and all, it's a humbling experience, it's a grounding experience, because none of us are perfect, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love the idea of being perfectly imperfect, and I think that that's a great place of self-acceptance and just being comfortable living in your own skin. Anyway, people generally try to find themselves in the external things. So you'll find a lot of people identify themselves with the work that they do or with the groups that they participate in, or religion. Those are some of the loose ways that people might define themselves. So our self-concept is a byproduct of our body, our feelings, our emotions, and our experiences. So that's one aspect to our self-concept. And then the other aspect is our social identity. And so when we say social identity, your name is part of what builds into your social identity, your memberships to various groups, and also different social roles that you play. And these, again, evolve and change as you grow and mature and as you figure out, what the best fit is for you as you navigate through life. So by way of self-concept and social identity, these are the aspects that are essential to who we are and are also the things that we feel makes us unique and individuals. I also find that people can sort of express themselves based on the relationships they have and also the things that they possess. So there are really no rules, but the way that you describe yourself, the way that you sort of build your self-concept says a lot about you. It's important to have a sense of what self means for you, and always kind of, and at least once a year, sort of circle back, because that can change. You know, what informs self in this moment, 2021, might be completely different in, by 2022. So it's important to sometimes sit down, recalibrate, and get a sense of what self is, because self is a collection of images, feelings, and memories, and beliefs that play into the way that we interact with the world around us and our actions. Our actions definitely, assuming congruence, have something to do with the way that we view ourselves. Our concept of self informs the way, it's the lens by which we interpret the experiences around us. And it's interesting because we talk a little bit about, the eyewitness dilemma and how a few people can be eyewitnesses to the same event, but yet they, speak on that event and they notice very different things from that event. And a lot of why they notice different things in that event is because of how they see themselves, and that lens is projected in how they take in information from the world around them, which is kind of cool. I've mentioned in a few videos schema and schemata, and these are psychological terms and I don't think I've explained these terms, and these terms are important for the exercise that we're going to do on self-concept. So all of us have a degree of categorical thinking. And essentially categorical thinking is the schema. So whenever I say schema, I'm referencing sort of a way of thinking that lumps information in different categories and groups just to make it more accessible. I mean, when we interact with the world around us, we know that every person is unique. We know that not any two events are the same. But it's an overwhelming experience to take everything as complete novelty. So our categorical thinking, this mechanism, just helps simplify things by setting expectations based on previous experiences. And that's essentially a schema. So whenever you hear of an event, there's a schema that kind of gets triggered, and it sets up all these assumptions and expectations that you have about said event, and that will either motivate or demotivate you from attending. Now, when it comes to people are generally, the schema that we attribute to people are generally built on observable characteristics. And this is sort of where the unconscious bias plays in sometimes, because we use easily observable characteristics to build a schema about someone. So that could be sex, ethnic group, it could be occupation, or even age. And what happens is, you see someone, it activates this schema, and then all the assumptions and beliefs that you have in relation to those attributes get triggered as well, and that sets you up with an expectation. We do this with people, we do this with events. So for some people, they hear hockey event, and when they hear hockey event, it triggers, different rituals that are sort of coincide with hockey, and then all the assumptions and beliefs and sort of attitudes that you have toward those events that are gonna that are going to be part of that experience, that's going to play into how motivated or demotivated you feel attending that event. Cognitive schemata, so that's a schema. So those are sort of isolated things that play into different categories within our lives. Now, cognitive schemata is essentially clusters of these schema that layer on top of one another, that all activate as you sort of interact with your environment. And so this helps you not get overwhelmed while you interact with your environment, because with all the attributes, with everything you look at, with everything you see, there's different assumptions that are tied to the expectations based on previous experience, whether that's your personal experience or through a third party. So if I were to try to summarize what a cognitive schemata is, it's a set of interconnected beliefs, information, images, memories, and examples about social objects. Things that we know something about that gets lit up so that we have a general expectation as we kind of go into that setting. So again, while there are flaws, and we can point out the flaws with this sort of, cognitive mechanism, because, bias and prejudice and discrimination kind of get plugged in there. But again, there's training so that you can kind of exercise those out. Schemata, essentially, it organizes and simplifies information, which helps us to process new information more rapidly, make quick pivots, and encode and remember new information quickly, because we're categorizing that information across these schemas that build into this cognitive schemata, which is essentially multiple schemas that kind of cluster together. So why am I talking about this? This relates back to our self-concept. So a self-concept is built on a person schema. We have person schemas, like we have individual schemas that are built on different types of individuals. So we have like a person schema built on a political figure, on a celebrity, on a athlete. We have general assumptions that get lit up, and beliefs that get lit up, and different attributes that get lit up when we hear about a person that falls within any of these specific categories. We can have person schemas that are built on personality traits. So you have like a schema for extroverted people, you have a schema for introverted people, and you have assumptions about how these people show up in spaces if you've attributed these characteristics to them as individuals. Schemata, because I mentioned they're clusters of different schemas altogether, and these schemas are categorical by way of events, groups, people, individuals within our settings, but they're organized hierarchically. So it's more general down to more specific. So you can have a general assumption about a group, and then as you kind of get more specific, it becomes more refined. With that information, I'm going to introduce a fun exercise, and this is an exercise on who are you. So we're going to answer the question, who are you, using some of the theory that I've just outlined right now. Because we are complicated individuals living in a complex environment, I want you to come up with 8 to 10 answers to the who are you question. And I want you to write this out. It's more fun when you write it out, I promise you. And think deeply. Give yourself a week to complete this exercise. Don't rush. Think deeply about it, but don't think up answers. Think deeply about what the actual answer is. But if you don't have an answer, if it's blank, then be at peace with the blankness, because sometimes when we do if our introspection is too forced, we come up with an answer because we don't actually have one, and it sort of is a blanket, and then we get confused. So if it's truly blank, leave it blank, but 8 to 10 by the end of the week. And so the objective is, by the end of the week, the sum of your answers is a very comprehensive and holistic picture of who you are, of how you see yourself. And then what you can do is you can show it to friends or different significant people within your life and see if whether or not there's a calibration, whether the way you see yourself is the way that you show up and are viewed by those around you. Like, as I mentioned, we have different schemas that build into the way that we interact with the world around us. We also have different schemas that build into self-concept. So I'll give you a couple, because I mentioned our self-concept is built on it's built on personal attributes as well as social identity. So when we think about social attributes, you can leverage your interests, your beliefs, your interpersonal characteristics, your personal attributes, and self-awareness. So things that you know yourself to be in certain settings, like different emotional sort of states that you're in, or different states of being that you're in. And that can be part of sort of the social attributes that you can attribute to yourself. And then by way of social identity, typically is ascribed characteristics, and that can be anything that you feel is meaningful enough to you that you want to attribute it to your identity. And also plays into social differentiation. So the ways, like the primary dimension of diversity, essentially, the ways that visibly you show up differently in the spaces that you're in. So this can be age, it can be gender, it can be, sexual orientation, whatever the case might be. But you're not obligated. So if there are aspects that typically define self for people, it's like the generalized understanding of how people define themselves, don't feel obligated to define yourself by those terms. It's really how you view yourself without having the pressure of other people sort of thinking that you've missed something. If that's not something that plays, there are certain attributes that we know we possess that don't necessarily play into our identity, and that's completely fine. And this exercise is really about you getting into the who are you for yourself without worrying about social conventions that typically play into identity. You're going to do this for you, your own way. You think and introspect. I want you to dwell on this. Self-concept is based on how you see yourself, so the ways that you think about yourself. But it is also informed by your actions and the way that you interact with the world around you. So sometimes there's dissonance. Sometimes the way we think about ourselves and the way we see ourselves is different from the way that we show up. So I want you to think about the way you see yourself and the ways that might have been contradicted in the ways that you've shown up, or the actions that you took, or the things that you said in your environment. And then ask yourself, which one of these, people, the way that I think or the way that I act, is a true depiction of me? We could be positive about everything about ourselves, or we could be realistic. And I leave it up to you to decide. I mean, this can be a very eye-opening exercise. And remember, we're all flawed. None of us are perfect. And I want this exercise to also allow you to embrace your imperfections. I know that myself is constructed, and there's me, like neutral state Rochelle, having a conversation with you, and then there's my higher self, and I feel like being an evolved human being. And then I have a mischief motivated self, that kind of wants to rock the boat a little bit from time to time to feel alive. And I'm okay with all of those, versions of myself showing up to different degrees in a given day even, So please don't feel the need to be a perfectionist. Like, show up in this exercise the way you show up without having filters. There was actually a really cool study that was done by Dollinger and Clancy in, I believe, 1993. And this was an exercise about, using photography as a way to define self. And this is something you can do as well. I mean, if you need something creative and you don't have any ideas, definitely take this on as an idea. But pretty much the challenge is you take 12 pictures, and they can be of anything so long as it relates back to how you view yourself. So by the time you're done with these 12 pictures, it can be of you, it can be of a scene. There are no rules other than every picture that you choose out of the 12 communicates something about your self-identity. So I encourage you to try that exercise. I think that would be fun. Once you finish the who are you exercise, where you answer the who are you with 8 to 10 questions, using social attributes as well as different social identity attributes, in order to complete that exercise. And then by the end, you'll have a better rounded, if not well-rounded, idea of who you are in relation to others. And then what I also invite you to do with this exercise is think about how much of how others see you informed your self-concept, and how much work do you need to do to build around your self-concept in such a way that you are the one that informs those around you of who you are. There are so many situations, based on how we're raised, or different pressures that we've experienced through life, where we've allowed society to kind of mold us and to pigeonhole us. And the idea of doing a self-concept work and this exercise is really to pull yourself out of that pigeonhole. Everyone, the categorical thinking is sometimes extrapolated and then gone to the extreme within our societies, where it's easier if we put everyone in these neat little boxes. But again, we're complex, we're complicated individuals living in a complex world, and you have every right to not fit neatly into any box. In fact, I challenge you to not fit neatly in a box. I'm someone who's very sensitive yet very intense. It doesn't fit neatly. People usually like someone to be only sensitive or only intense. I am the two together. It means I don't fit neatly into a box. And you know what? I've accepted that. And I'm happy that I found people who've accepted that as well. So I want to make sure to give you permission, in case you're looking for it from anyone, to not feel pressure during this exercise and put yourself neatly in a box, and just be you. And then if you see that there's aspects of you that show up in this exercise that you don't necessarily show to the world around you, I challenge you to make an effort to demonstrate it, to show it. Show up your true authentic self. And then, people and you'll see, you might lose people as a result of it, but you'll gain people who are more aligned to who you actually are. We always focus on the loss, but honestly the gain is always worth the sacrifice. At least my life experience has taught me that. So that's it for self-concept. I hope that that activity, does you well. And I'd love to hear how you're doing. If you run into like different challenges, please do reach out to me. You can email me. My email is in the description down below, or you can send a comment. And I'd love to hear how you're doing. And so I guess that's it on mental health this week, and I hope you like the exercise, and until next time.